Now we are talking to a lawyer who represented two women who spoke to the House Ethics Committee. He was in the room for both of those interviews. And here's what he said one of his clients told those House investigators.
At this particular event, what did your client witness?
So she testified in July of 2017 at this house party. She was walking out to the pool area and she looked to her right and she saw Representative Gaetz having sex with her friend who was 17.
Now, Matt Gaetz has denied he ever had sex with anyone under the age of 18 years old. We also know, according to sources, that a woman testified to the House Ethics Committee that Matt Gaetz had sex with her when she was 17 years old and in high school, and he was a sitting congressman. Again, Matt Gaetz has denied that.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, that was an ABC News report of a lawyer revealing what was given to the House Ethics Committee regarding Matt Gaetz having sex with an underage girl while he was a sitting congressman. So does this change any of the investigative process that's moving forward right now as far as Gaetz is concerned?
You know, the first thing that leapt to mind when I saw that reporting, Brian, as a former career prosecutor, is why wasn't Matt Gaetz prosecuted? Because what the ABC News report said was, one, a witness testified to the House Ethics Committee that she saw Matt Gaetz, while a sitting congressman, having sex with a 17-year-old high school student. And then there was additional reporting that a woman testified to the House Ethics Committee, another witness, who at age 17 had sex with Matt Gaetz as a sitting congressman. Now, there's no reporting pulling those two things together, but even in isolation, each one of those things is damning as evidence of crime. So what does it change moving forward? First of all, let's get this out of the way. I don't expect it will jumpstart a criminal investigation of Matt Gaetz. I have to assume the Department of Justice had all of this same evidence that was ultimately presented to the House Ethics Committee. But here's what it ought to change. I mean, for gosh sakes, this information must be given over to the Senate Republicans, who will be called upon to provide advice and consent on the nomination of Matt Gaetz to be what? Attorney General of the United States. Are you effing kidding me? And what does Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, say? No, we need to bury this information. This information should never see the light of day. Are you kidding me? So let's hope that the more the evidence pours out about what is in that House Ethics Committee report, the more, the chorus will rise, people demanding this report must be made public, must be provided to the Senate so they can use it as part and parcel of the confirmation hearing for Matt Gaetz in the event his nomination doesn't get polled.
Glenn, we now have reporting that instead of the House Ethics Committee having met on Friday, which was expected, and that meeting was obviously pulled as Republicans decided to bail, caving to pressure from their party, that meeting is going to happen on Wednesday of this week. What's your reaction to that, and what do you expect to see?
Yeah, first of all, I don't believe anything Mike Johnson says. I'm not sure I ever did, but I certainly don't believe it now when he is urging publicly that this report should be buried, even though it seems to contain information about sexual crimes being committed by a sitting congressman who has now been named as the possible Attorney General for the United States. So they're going to play this game of delay and hide the ball and misdirect. I suspect, we're going to see that moving forward. But what is also clear is that the Senate Republicans have been going on record, guys like Senator John Cornyn, and saying, no, we need this report. We demand this report. Now, what the Republican senators will do with it, once they get their hands on it, nobody ever made any money betting on, the bravery and candor and allegiance to the law of the Senate Republicans. But for gosh sakes, there has to be some minimum standards for the top law enforcement agent in our country.
Glenn, this is a little bit outside of the legal purview here, but given what you know about this Republican Party, a party that has so much of its identity steeped in this idea that they have to push back against, the pedophile Democrats who are running underhanded sex trafficking rings under pizza places in their basement where there existed no basements, and how you can't log on to Twitter without, being called a pedophile if you're a Democrat, and, the list goes on, right? For them to then line up behind a guy who is credibly accused of sexual misconduct with a minor, it almost feels like a joke to just yell hypocrisy. But does it not blow your mind that this is a party whose identity, again, is so steeped in this idea of protecting children, who is now not only fine with, but figuring out ways to bury a report that may show him guilty of doing the exact thing that they predicated their identity on blocking?
Yeah, Brian, projection, thy name is the Republican Party. And everybody sees right through it. Listen, I am always hoping that Senate Republicans will, if not grow an entire spine, maybe sprout a vertebra or two and begin standing up for who? For their constituents, for the American people, rather than laying down for their dear leader, Donald Trump. And, if the reporting can be credited, at least there are, reportedly 30 Republicans, as many as 30 Republicans who, behind closed doors, quietly, without attribution, are apparently saying, yeah, Matt Gaetz, no way. Now, when push comes to shove and Trump starts, turning the screws to them and applying pressure, do they fold? Do they cave? We would expect them to, given their track records and given who they are. But here's what I will say, Brian. I am hoping that now that the senators, are comfortably in their newly elected positions and they don't have to face an election, at least for a couple of years, maybe 4, maybe 6 years, maybe they can begin standing up for their own constituents and the American people just a little bit by standing against unqualified, ill-suited, and frankly downright dangerous nominees like Matt Gaetz, Tulsi Gabbard, Pete Hegseth, for gosh sakes, as the Secretary of Defense. They should want to protect the country and at least have minimally qualified people in Trump's cabinet, conservative though they might be. Let them, push all the conservative policies they want, but let's not endanger the American people by putting a guy like Matt Gaetz in the position of Attorney General.
Yeah, that's well said. Glenn, do you think that the DOJ has egg on its face by virtue of what we're now seeing from the House Ethics Committee? And granted, we haven't seen this report yet, so this is all conjecture. This is based on a lot of the reporting we've seen, credible reporting, even including what we just heard from ABC News at the top of this clip. But if it does come out that a 17-year-old girl testified to the House Ethics Committee under penalty of perjury that Matt Gaetz, was having sex with underage girls or trafficking underage girls, if any of this comes to bear, is the DOJ going to be left with egg on its face by virtue of doing nothing in the face of what might be really incriminating and devastating evidence against Matt Gaetz?
Yeah, Brian, not to be a smart aleck, but it's like DOJ is forever sitting in a booth at a diner having breakfast, and they rarely seem to remove the egg from their face. The reason I say that is because they finally started a criminal investigation into all things January 6th after what happened? A congressional committee, the January 6th House Select Committee, investigated and revealed to the public Donald Trump's crimes on and around.
So it's almost like they need to be publicly, not shamed, but in a way, shamed into doing their jobs. And only when Congress actually deigns to expose some of the most nefarious facets of these crimes will the DOJ actually say, oh, yeah, you know what, we do have to investigate this. And this is something that we've been looking into the whole time. But like without this, absent this action from Congress, whether it's with January 6th or now from the House Ethics Committee, this is something the DOJ should have taken the lead on, not followed from behind.
Yeah, and listen, I am loath to criticize the Department of Justice without knowing what the evidence is behind their decision not to prosecute Matt Gaetz. But for gosh sakes, if we see, as you say, sworn testimony before a congressional committee by a witness to this crime and by the victim of the crime. Now, I can't say based on the ABC reporting if we're talking about the same person,
right,
but for gosh sakes, it sure is a strong start to a criminal investigation of sex crimes, and they opted not to do it. Why? Well, you know, I need to know the why, because there is not only smoke, there seems to be a blazing fire concerning these allegations.
Well, hopefully the next time we talk about this will be after the release of a report, thanks to what the House Ethics Committee has decided to do. That remains to be seen. Again, to your exact point, nobody's ever lost money betting on the the timidity, the cowardice of this Republican Party. So I wouldn't expect these House Republicans to decide to come together in the Ethics Committee and vote to release this report. But hopefully we do see this report in one form or another at some point, and then we can have a more informed look at what we're dealing with Matt Gaetz. And hopefully, to the broader point that we're trying to make here, everybody will recognize within the Senate how unqualified and frankly unacceptable it would be to confirm somebody like Matt Gaetz to the role of the highest law enforcement official in the entire United States. So more to come on this front. For those who are watching, if you want to follow along, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.